Ireland. Mr. Peter Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I beg to move the motion in the names of my right honourable and honourable friends and myself, as on the order paper. I think perhaps I should begin by providing some explanation for choice of the subject matter, and perhaps also outlining something of our purpose and intention. Members who study these things will be aware that our last debate was on the subject of the economy, and as we are presently looking at the issue of policing and justice, and it is a major subject in Northern Ireland, this issue of parading is very closely aligned with that subject, and therefore has a critical common theme, which I will come to in the course of my remarks. I want to make it clear that the wording of the motion was considered in the context of ensuring that this would not become a debate of contention. It is a desire on my part and that of my colleagues that the matters relating to parades in Northern Ireland would be resolved. I believe that it's important, particularly in the context of the devolution of policing and justice. I strongly contend that while these have been divisive issues in the past, they should not be treated in a manner where it is a victory for one side or the other to seek and gain a resolution, but that it should be considered to be a success for all. I indicated that I believed it to be an imperative that we resolve these issues in the context of the potential devolution of policing and justice. I say that because to leave these issues unresolved and to devolve powers on policing and justice would plant a seed at the heart of government in Northern Ireland, which I believe would be corrosive and divisive, and which ultimately could in fact be the straw that would break the camel's back. And I therefore urge people to seriously consider these matters, to put them at the centre of debate, particularly in Northern Ireland, and for politicians to seek a resolution to the problems that exist. All too often, the facts are that we get around to June or July, and politicians and other well-meaning people decide that's a good time for us to start considering how we could resolve contentious parades. But it is already too late, and the parades start moving forward. It becomes more difficult to get a resolution, and we all wait until the following year, and then we suddenly wake up in June or July to the issue again. It was for that reason that, as First Minister, I invited both the Orange Order in Portadown and the Gervaki Road residents to come and see me, in order that we would have a full year to start working through how we might resolve that issue. I believe we did make some progress. Both parties I found to be willing to sit down and to talk about how they might resolve those issues, and both of them, I believe, were looking towards the Parades Commission or some other independent arbitrator to bring together the parties and to consider a resolution of that parade, which I think has been one of the longest running disputed parades that we are presently having to deal with. So I believe that now is the right time, and that we shouldn't wait until we're into the marching season, as it's referred to in Northern Ireland, before we start struggling with these matters. So it is my goal, and that of my colleagues, I hope, that over time parades in Northern Ireland will be dealt with as they would in any other part of the United Kingdom, indeed as they would be dealt with in any other European democracy. As a Unionist, I have absolutely no difficulty in stating categorically that a human rights framework is crucial to get us to that point in Northern Ireland. I recognise that that framework, though there might be some that would not be happy about it, will be defined principally by the case law of the European Court of Human Rights. I also recognise that in certain situations there may well be a number of competing rights. Now, in any lawful society, the balance between such competing rights will ultimately be determined by the courts. not by the group that has the ability to cause the maximum disruption around contentious parades. Those who are concerned that the current legal framework in Northern Ireland surrounding the behaviour of parades might not be sufficiently adequate to deal with these circumstances, I don't believe should lose any sleep worrying in case additional legislation is required. The current contents of the statute book, I believe, are more than sufficient. A cursory glance through the relevant criminal legislation reveals no less than 7 pieces of legislation which could be applied to anyone misbehaving at parades, either in those participating or in those protesting against parades. The Public Order Northern Ireland Order 1987, the Protection from Harassment Northern Ireland Order 1997, the Terrorism Act 2000, the Offences Against the Persons Act 1861, the Criminal Justice No. 2 Northern Ireland Order 2004, and of course the Human Rights Act 1998, which places all public authorities under the obligation to act in a manner compatible with the European Convention on Human Rights. It also places those authorities under an obligation to take into account decisions of the European Court of Human Rights. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, freedom of expression, as guaranteed by Article 10, has been described by that court as, and I quote, one of the essential foundations of a democratic society. Now, who am I to disagree with that assessment? And that right, of course, is not absolute, but again, the court provides assistance when restrictions on freedom of expression are mooted. Any restriction, and again I quote, must be convincingly established, unquote, and subject to very close scrutiny given the recognition that freedom of expression is often a prerequisite for the enjoyment of many other rights, including the right to freedom of peaceful assembly as articulated in Article 11. This right is one which should not be interpreted restrictively. Again, the court is of assistance to us. And let me say to Unionists, who have, I believe, for far too long been reluctant to embrace the protections that human rights legislation provides, that there should be no in praying the Convention in aid in relation to parading matters.